In August 2019, 50 different families in a quiet Virginia suburb woke up to find vintage televisions sitting on their front porches. The security footage showed a man walking through the dead of night, wearing an enormous hollowed-out television set over his own head, casually waving at the cameras before vanishing into the darkness. Local authorities confiscated the devices and investigated the neighborhoods, but no suspect was ever identified. Join us and let's discover the 13 most mysterious and unexplained events ever recorded. Let's go.
Topic number 13. Jenny Hanover. Sailors returning to European ports in the 16th century brought with them the mummified remains of miniature dragons that deeply shocked the general population. These alarming specimens featured leathery wings, long tails, and terrifying faces with deep-set eyes and gaping mouths, quickly becoming prized possessions for wealthy collectors of the bazaar. The creatures were sold in bustling dockside markets as undeniable proof of real sea monsters inhabiting the unexplored ocean depths. The truth behind these abominations involved an extreme level of anatomical manipulation by opportunistic fishermen. They captured specific species of rays, meticulously dissecting and shaping the carcasses before baking them under the scorching sun. By folding the lateral fins upward to simulate bat wings and using the natural nasal cavities of the ray to mimic a humanoid face, they engineered a completely artificial cryptid that fooled the science of the era. The original eyes of the animal were hidden, forcing the observer to look directly at the manipulated underside of the creature. The relentless production of these macabre souvenirs lasted for centuries, proving how easily the public accepts physical abominations as absolute truths. This exact human vulnerability to accept the impossible right in front of their eyes paved the way for urban anomalies that defy logic and threaten the modern security of entire neighborhoods.
Topic number 12. Virginia TV head. Nighttime surveillance cameras captured a solitary figure walking down an empty residential street with a massive cathode ray tube television resting heavily on his shoulders. During a warm night in Henrico County, this unknown individual systematically visited dozens of homes, carefully placing heavy, outdated televisions directly on the front porches of sleeping residents. The footage is deeply unsettling due to the methodical calm of the suspect, who occasionally turned the heavy monitor on his head toward the security lenses to offer a bizarre, friendly wave. Carrying and distributing 50 massive electronic devices requires significant physical endurance and complex logistical planning, resembling a coordinated tactical operation rather than a simple neighborhood prank. Police officers spent hours the next morning driving through the streets, collecting the strange electronic graveyard, and examining the devices for explosives, hidden microphones, or threatening messages hidden in the gears. They found nothing but empty, obsolete hardware, leaving authorities completely paralyzed regarding the motive of the mass invasion. The surreal episode evaporated without a single arrest or confession, leaving the community terrified of the vulnerability of their homes. The impotence of security cameras against bizarre invaders becomes even more severe when the captured figures seem to operate outside the jurisdiction of any earthly government.
Only 1% of people know the dark truth behind what we are about to show you next. If you want to be part of the few who actually know what's happening in the world, subscribe and leave a like right now. Done? Look at this.
Topic number 11. Niagara Men in Black. Security cameras inside a Canadian hotel recorded two identical men moving with entirely unnatural mechanical synchronization across an empty lobby. The individuals wore identical black suits, vintage fedoras, and heavy trench coats, displaying extreme pale skin and a complete absence of visible eyebrows or eyelashes. They invaded the establishment, interrogating the staff in search of a specific guest who had recently reported a massive sighting of triangular lights in the night sky. The most disturbing aspect of the video record is the total absence of facial expressions and the uncoordinated blinking of the intruders, causing the hotel employees to report an immediate sense of biological dread. The men knew the exact name of the witness's manager and intimate details of his private life that had never been shared in public records. When they realized their target was not on the premises, they pivoted in perfect unison and exited through the glass doors without making a single additional sound. Security experts who analyzed the tape confirmed the video contained no edits, validating the physical existence of unidentified intimidation agents operating in the shadows. Civilian investigators continue tracking the whereabouts of these entities that silently appear to suppress eyewitnesses. The relentless drive to hide anomalies from the public eye echoes ancient discoveries that also attempted to isolate anomalous bodies from the surface of the Earth.
Topic number 10. Zeleny Yar. Archaeologists in the freezing Siberian tundra smashed through a heavy cocoon made entirely of birch bark and thick copper plates to find a perfectly preserved face. The excavation team was working in a remote medieval necropolis just below the Arctic Circle when they unearthed the mummified remains of a 7-year-old child. The extreme sub-zero temperatures of the soil, combined with the antimicrobial properties of the copper shielding, triggered an accidental and flawless preservation process that defied natural decay. The child was tightly wrapped in premium reindeer skin and thick bear fur, wearing an intricate bronze pendant shaped like a wild beast resting on his chest. The detail that disturbed researchers was the complete absence of adult women in the burial site, alongside the realization that this specific grave lacked the standard wooden sarcophagus used for the other bodies. The deliberate wrapping of the individual in heavy, oxidizing metals indicates a level of spiritual isolation intended for a highly important figure within a civilization that history erased. The copper plates oxidized over the centuries, staining the fragile skin with a terrifying green hue and cementing the most bizarre funerary ritual in the region. The monumental effort of ancient cultures to protect sacred entities from destruction often involved burying things much larger and more terrifying than human bodies.
Topic number 9. Lamassu. Colossal stone guardians weighing over 30 tons each were deliberately buried under the sands of Mesopotamia by the very empires that carved them. These massive sentinels featured the muscular body of a sharp-horned bull, the sprawling wings of a predatory eagle, and the meticulously bearded head of a human king with a severe expression. Positioned strategically at the gates of Assyrian palaces, the statues were sculpted from single, gigantic blocks of solid alabaster to project terrifying authority over city visitors. The engineering required to transport these monolithic beasts from remote quarries to the royal capitals involved thousands of workers sliding the stones over wooden tracks lubricated with animal oils. The statues featured 5 purposely chiseled legs, creating an optical illusion where the creature appeared to stand firmly at attention from the front, but aggressively marching forward when viewed from the side. After the brutal collapse of the Assyrian Empire, many of these magnificent statues were suddenly buried in deep trenches to completely erase the protective magic they supposedly radiated against enemies. The oppressive scale of these mythological protectors reveals an insane obsession with spiritual defense, carved into untouchable rock. The desperate need to repel hostile invaders from one's walls takes on truly horrifying tones when the battlefield becomes the human body itself.
Topic number 8. Morgellons disease. Microscopic red and blue fibers sprout directly through the intact skin of thousands of patients who report the agonizing sensation of insects crawling in their flesh. This medical mystery forces victims into a daily biological nightmare characterized by severe joint pain, crippling chronic fatigue, and open lesions that defy all conventional healing processes. The physical fibers extracted from the wounds are highly resistant to chemical degradation, appearing to grow organically out of the deep cellular layers of the patient's epidermis. Public health organizations formally classify the condition as a delusional disorder, where victims supposedly scratch normal imperfections to the point of severe mutilation. However, independent cellular biologists vehemently argue that the condition represents a physical manifestation of a mutating bacterial infection that aggressively attacks the immune system and alters keratin production. Analysis of the fibers under powerful electron microscopes provided conflicting results, identifying unknown polymers that match neither human genetics nor common environmental textile fibers. The total lack of clinical consensus traps victims in a terrifying vacuum between invisible biological deterioration and official psychiatric rejection. Agonizing imprisonment within one's own body reaches an entirely new level of absolute horror when the physical confinement is broadcast live to the world.
Topic number 7. Chip Chan. Surveillance cameras inside a heavily barricaded apartment in South Korea continuously broadcast the physical wasting of a woman trapped inside her own home. For over a decade, internet forums have accidentally stumbled upon this live feed, showcasing the victim sleeping in massive, erratic shifts that paralyze her for up to 20 hours straight. At this point, the threat scale abandons biological or historical mysteries to expose the contemporary nightmare of absolute technological control and real-time loss of human autonomy. The walls of her apartment are completely plastered with frantic handwritten posters claiming she was microchipped against her will and held hostage by a shadow figure called P. The broadcast operates in absolute silence, forcing global observers to deduce the victim's agony strictly through her bloody skin rashes and robotic movement patterns. She insists in fragmented blog posts that the embedded technology chemically forces sleep and allows her captor to monitor and punish her most intimate thoughts. The brutal reality of this interactive prison remains without official investigation, documenting the lethal footprint of chronic digital isolation on a daily basis. The mental devastation caused by a complete forced disconnection from society has historical parallels anchored in empty oceans where there simply were no screens to signal for help.
Topic number 6. Juana Maria. 18 years of crushing isolation on a barren rock in the Pacific Ocean began the exact moment a woman watched her entire tribe sail away into the horizon. In the early 19th century, fur hunters violently clashed with the indigenous Nicoño tribe, forcing the chaotic evacuation of the surviving population to the Californian mainland. During the panic of boarding the vessels, Juana Maria dove into the freezing ocean waters, swimming bravely back to the deserted shore to rescue her forgotten baby in the sands. The infant perished within the first few days, leaving the mother entirely isolated on a massive island battered by brutal winds, forcing her to build shelter solely with the massive ribs of dead whales. She survived by hunting fierce elephant seals, sewing bird feathers to craft thick waterproof dresses, and marking the endless passage of time on a long carved wooden stick. When explorers located her almost 2 decades later, verbal communication was physically impossible, as she had become the last living speaker of an entire language wiped off the planet. She was taken to the urban coast, but died tragically weeks later due to the lethal shock of civilized biology. The permanent silencing of a language displays how easily human wisdom is erased, a dangerous pattern that also annihilated indecipherable mechanical gears from the ancient world.
Chelyabinsk meteor. 4 inches of extremely thick ballistic glass weighing hundreds of pounds slowly levitated off its steel base inside a Russian history museum under the terrified watch of security cameras. The armored dome was meticulously designed to imprison the heaviest surviving fragment of the Chelyabinsk meteor, the brutal cosmic rock that violently exploded over the Ural Mountains and shattered the city.
Electronic monitoring recorded the exact instant the unbreakable cover rose continuously into the air, triggering all containment systems in panic without any human interference or visible system failure. The facility's technical directors halted operations to fully dismantle the pulleys, discovering the entire mechanical lifting network was electrically dead and disconnected from the central wiring at the time of the event. The leaked clip generated fierce investigative panic, supporting hypotheses that the space mineral retained a dangerous resonance or responded to invisible geological frequencies, activating a massive electromagnetic repulsion against the glass itself. The absurd mechanical torque required to hoist that weight defies conventional terrestrial gravity, leaving physicists astonished before a documented and highly visible material anomaly. Our comfortable understanding of physical rules and limitations suffers a much more devastating blow when primitive maps perfectly detail the shape of stones hidden at the hidden ends of the world.
Topic number 3. Piri Reis Map. A gazelle skin parchment painted in 1513 by an Ottoman military spy maps out glacial valleys and mountains that humanity would not officially discover for another 300 years. Admiral Piri Reis crafted this absurd cartographic anomaly by sketching the west coast of Africa, the beaches of Brazil, and the perfect coastal outline of the Antarctic continent, completely free of its thick ice cap. The naval officer reported on the dark edges of the tattered document that he compiled the strokes by crossing highly classified archaic maritime scrolls, including lost cartographic maps used by Christopher Columbus himself on his bloody routes. The irreversible shock of modern researchers is based on 20th century military seismic verification, which scanned the foundation under the Antarctic ice and confirmed the solid rock crushed there perfectly matches the ancient ink. The undeniable physical existence of this material suggests that hyper-advanced global civilizations possessed devastating ocean navigation technology before the southern continent violently froze in a forgotten era. This irrefutable geographical scandal destroys the accepted version of early human exploration and continues to haunt historians in military museums across Europe. Exhuming buried secrets that openly contradict the world narrative often triggers retaliation processes and catastrophes that threaten to tear the fabric of peaceful global society.
Topic number 2. Gur-e-Amir. Soviet scientists drove heavy tools into the heart of a nephrite jade block, ruthlessly violating a carved stone warning that promised to spread global death if opened. The massive tomb rested in the dusty darkness of Samarkand, imprisoning the bandaged corpse of Tamerlane, the bloodthirsty Asian conqueror whose brutal militias calculatingly annihilated a massive portion of all living civilization. Desperate clerics begged the invading archaeologists to abandon the site in the summer of 1941, warning of the inscribed curse that swore to unleash a hungry, even more demonic warlord upon the desecrators. Dismissing the threat as empty psychological superstition, the Soviet agents shattered the indestructible protective lid to extract the skeleton and analyze the historical genocider's deformed skull under cold laboratory lamps. Exactly 2 days after the lead funeral seals were broken, Germany unleashed Operation Barbarossa against Russia, activating the most destructive ground invasion in human history and drenching the Soviet Union in blood. Cornered by the crushing terror of the impending apocalypse that coincided exactly with the profane excavation, communist authorities hastily ordered the corpse buried back into the ancestral pit. The terrifying submission of modern tragic warfare to underground sorcery proves the terror of revered leaders as fallen entities from other dark, deadly worlds in the galaxy.
Tutankhamun Dagger. Chemical spectrometry tests executed on a flawless dagger violently strapped to the bone of a mummified pharaoh revealed the murder weapon was forged entirely from materials completely absent from Earth's geology. When English explorers slowly unrolled the rotting linen of King Tutankhamun, the lighting exposed the gleaming ceremonial weapon resting on the monarch's right leg, displaying a mirrored dark metal that completely rejected rust and corrosion over millennia of desert confinement. The foundries of that antiquity possessed a grotesque physical inability to reach the colossal thermal temperatures required to even heat or mold that specific type of hard rock. X-ray analyses conducted recently penetrated the crust of the royal equipment and detected brutal concentrations of heavy nickel tangled with traces of bright cobalt, perfectly copying the exact atomic mutation of charred meteorite stones found shattered in the Egyptian sea. The boy was walled up holding the volcanic shrapnel of a cosmic white dwarf, melted down with blows to form the supreme spear of alien power that would tear the skin of any opponent and absorb the domain of the gods of the dark limestone stars themselves. The systemic organization capable of harvesting murderous atmospheric fire to forge sharp swords abandons all skepticism about gods walking alongside desperate mortals in the dry garbage of the silent, infinite, and obscure stone galaxy.
If you thought this was terrifying, you are not ready for what they found in the video on your screen. Click it right now. The truth is worse than you think.